Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. This is Monday, July 20th, and this is our now weekly coronavirus update for Westchester County. As you know, there was a point in time beginning in March where we had daily updates, and then we ratcheted it back to 4 days a week, and now we're doing this every Monday to give you an update as to where we stand with the coronavirus outbreak here in Westchester County, and then some related information which we'll share with you. We'll open it up to the press. We have folks from members of the press who are covering this remotely. They're not here in the room in order to protect themselves from exposure. And they'll be dealing with Joe Scamato, our Deputy Director of Communications. And at the end of this, we'll take some questions from there. Then, of course, any member of the press want to follow up with questions thereafter, they can reach out to us at our numbers, and we'll be happy to chat with them. The coronavirus numbers as we have them from the state of New York as of today, Monday, July 20th, continue to show the diminution that we've been talking about for quite a while. There has been an increase in testing, but here in Westchester County, the increase in testing has not generated a significant increase in the number of positive cases. In fact, the percentage of people who've been tested that come out positive has been dropping regularly. But the more widespread the amount of testing we have, the greater confidence we have that we have some sense of the size and scope of the infection. And we put out some information yesterday where we made some comparisons against where we were a week ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, and 3 months ago. 3 months ago gets us into the heart of the infection period where we were at the same time in April as we are today, two-thirds of the way through the month. Our numbers for today show that there are now, by our calculation, 467 active cases of coronavirus here in Westchester County. That number continues to drop. We've had a couple of weeks where it oscillated a little bit up and down, but 467 is the lowest number that we've had since the very beginning of the infection in those weeks in March, where the detection numbers jumped very aggressively, and now at 476. We're very encouraged about that number. We have 1,440 deaths altogether over the period of this time. There were no overnight deaths last night, and over the prior week, actually 8 days of the last week, we've lost 5 people. That compares with the prior week of having lost 8 people. And then if you go back to some of the other higher periods of time, we lost in the double digits and at some point in time the triple digits far enough back. We have 35,551 people testing positive for coronavirus, and that gives us a fatality rate of the number of people who have tested positive and have passed away at slightly above 4% of the total population of those that tested positive. And that is the fatality rate, not built against the total population, but against those that we know have been infected by the disease. I do not have an accurate hospitalization number for today. The last numbers that we had were in the lower range of 40. We believe now that we're in the vicinity of the mid-30s on hospitalizations. We'll get an accurate number for those in the media that would like to know what those numbers are. We'll be happy to track those for you so that you have it officially and can work off of that. We're seeing across the United States a rise in the infection in a number of states that began this process with very low numbers of infection, and they opened up many of the structures of the society. We here in New York and Connecticut and New Jersey and some of the other northeastern states closed those structures of society at great financial loss, at the loss to individuals, at the loss to small businesses and large businesses, at the loss to not-for-profits, for religious institutions, and also for governments. And while we won't address it in today's update, we're still working through a series of strategies to try to reduce the budget gap that has been created by the loss of tax revenue, primarily sales tax revenue, to COVID. But now those states, those other states, Florida, Arizona, Texas, are the ones most prominently in the news, but a whole sweep of southern and western states are now experiencing a tremendous spike in the number of their cases, number of positives, and you're seeing on television some of the things that we were afraid of happening here in the New York area, which would be insufficient amount of hospital beds, ICU beds, PPEs, ventilators, enough professionals to be able to deal with it. When we hit the peak of our period of time in late March and the first couple of weeks of April, we had to suffer through the fear that we might not have enough to accommodate those. The 3,000 plus beds in Westchester County and the 160 some odd ICU beds wound up being sufficient to handle the demand at that time. We reached a point of maximum point of in the vicinity of 1,200 people hospitalized for COVID. But now, as I said, we estimate ourselves in the range just below 40 individuals hospitalized, which we think is good numbers. We had heard 3 weeks ago about the spiked incident that occurred on June 20th, which is now a month ago today in Chappaqua. We believe that spike has run its course. We believe that there are no additional cases that we expect to track to that particular outbreak. It's now been a month, and usually the 2-week period of time of incubation is the normal time that we look at to make sure that we've cleared that, and we do believe we've cleared that. We're not aware of any other spikes that we have to be mindful of. The 4th of July weekend is now 2 weeks in the rearview mirror, and whatever combination of peoples may have occurred informally or formally, we have cleared those 2 weeks as well. So if we have not seen a particular spike in cases, then that we think is a good sign as well. But there is nothing to be overly confident about. I say that very dispassionately with a corporate mindset. We're doing well, but we're not through the woods. I think we say it every time we talk about it. We still have no understood vaccine to treat this disease. We have no antiviral treatment to use to treat the disease if you have it. A couple of drugs are out on the market now that have been approved to lessen the impacts of those who suffer from COVID at a severe level, but nothing yet that once you get the disease, you can take it in order to deal with it and kill it inside of you. It is your natural antibodies that are doing that job for those that happen to get the disease. And we were fortunate that the amount of people that actually got seriously sick was a smaller percentage of those that we thought. But we have to be prepared in every instance, and we also have to make sure that we're testing. There's a debate in the nation about testing. There's no debate in my mind about testing. I think the more we test, the better off we are. We've conducted 347,649 tests in Westchester County. There's some duplication. People who have tested positive at one point in time later on retested and tested negative. There may be some people for renewed exposure that tested negative once, comes back again, tests negative, and obviously, it's also possible that you test positive on a second or even a third test, depending on when you might have been exposed to it. But to the greater extent, the 347,000 plus tests, we think roughly represents one individual per person, one test per person, and that puts us very close to the 350,000 test mark, which based on Westchester County's population would be 35% of our people having tested for coronavirus. That's a tremendous percentage. It's not 85 or 90%, but at 35%, that's a significant number. And we're seeing steadily every day 3,000 or more tests, as many as 4,000 tests a day in Westchester County. Testing is much easier to obtain now than it ever has been before. When we started this pandemic, reacting to it in March, we did not even have the authority to administer tests locally from the CDC. Now we have that. We still have the Glen Island facility. It has cost us a beautiful park and beach during the summertime. And, on one level, we wish that this were all over so we could open up that park and that beach. But right now, the state is still using it for drive-in testing. There's now other testing sites all across Westchester County. It's not just one or two. There's some you can walk up to in some of our urban areas. And we think all of that is, roughly speaking, good news. In terms of the other effects of how we're responding to the COVID virus, you are aware that Westchester County is part of the Hudson Valley region. Dutchess, Putnam, Orange, Ulster, Sullivan counties entered into Phase 4 a week ago. We've been in Phase 4 now for a week. We continue to show positive numbers. Actually, 2 weeks, I'm sorry, we've been into Phase 4, and we've continued to show positive numbers. So we think we're in good shape as we have opened up restaurants, indoor and outdoor restaurants, as we have opened up, the barbershops and the beauty salons and the nail salons and all those things that we were hesitant to do until we reached a certain phase. As we've continued to do that, there's been no significant increase in infection. So we're comfortable that that's the right circumstance. I think probably the most important thing is a number of Westchester residents that are voluntarily doing the things that we're told by public health to do, to wear masks, to avoid being in large crowds, so social distance to the best of our ability, wash our hands or sanitize our hands, and refrain from certain kinds of activities that would put people potentially in harm's way. It has been a financial burden for the local businesses to have been delayed in opening. The first phase of this began now well over a month and a half, 2 months ago, but Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, now Phase 4 still represent businesses that are not able to function at their peak occupancy or their peak attendance, and yet with that, we're still maintaining the lower infection rate. And I think it must be understood that the economic development activity follows following proper health protocols. This is not proper health protocols for any other reason than to make sure that the disease does not spread. And if the disease does not spread, we're able to open up segments of the economy effectively so businesses can get back to selling their product or service, hopefully making a profit, hopefully re-employing people that were otherwise unemployed. We know that some businesses have gone under, and we've certainly tried through the county government with our small grant and loan programs, with the federal programs that are available, and a host of other ones, to try to be helpful where we can. But we know that many businesses operate a very small profit margin, and if you go 1, 2 months, 3 months, and you're not open, then a problem does exist. We know that the Jefferson Valley Mall is planned to be open. Our other malls now have been open. There was a big concern about opening malls up to a couple of weeks ago. There are still some parts of the society that are not yet open, but we're happy that we're working on all of them. Let me report on 2 of them that we've been directly involved in. The county had today, on Monday, a call this morning, as we do every Monday morning, with the school superintendents across Westchester County. And we had another call at 11 o'clock this morning with representatives of the various colleges and universities. So in the first call, the continuing dialogue with K to 12. In the second call, a dialogue with those in higher education. And Westchester County has, in higher education, Pace University, Iona College, Sarah Lawrence, Concordia, Fordham University, our own Westchester Community College. If I sort of missed somebody, SUNY Purchase, I didn't mean to miss them, but we have a presence of higher education in this county, as well as the local 40-some-odd districts of K to 12 education. In each of these calls, the county is trying to figure out how to help those educational institutions meet the protocols set down by the state and to develop plans to do things so they can open safely. You can imagine each of those 2 different types of education have different challenges. On the K to 12 side, at the front end, you're dealing with children in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Their ability to follow certain kind of restrictions and orders is much more difficult than older students. When you get to the college level, you're dealing with college students that are on a college campus in a dorm setting, and that overnight residential setting creates other kinds of problems than you would have in a K to 12 situation. So in working with each of those, we're trying to put together a practical group of people to work with. With our local school districts, we've developed a working group that includes our Deputy Commissioner of Mental Health, Community Mental Health, Joe Glazer. He'll be working directly with White Plains School Superintendent Joe Ricca on some of these programs. Susan Spear and Aviva Myers of our office here will be working on this project, along with Dr. Dial Hewlett, Peter DeLucia, and Marina Yogel, all of the Department of Health, and Hernane de Almeida, who's with the Department of Public Works. They will all be working as a task force with our local elementary schools to try to provide that assistance that the schools need from the county. The county is not the governing entity over the schools, the state is, but whether it's structuring contact tracing protocols, whether it's knowing what happens in a particular school building if a person, either a teacher or a student, tests positive, and then our county health department becomes important, how we go about assisting them in purchasing personal protective equipment, PPEs, the acronym you've heard a lot of. All of those different things and many more are part of those efforts, and we're in the process now of surveying all the different schools. You must consider that our school districts range in size from very small districts with 1,000, 1,500 students to Yonkers, which is the biggest of all, has about 28,000 students in multiple buildings. So there's a range of school districts, and we're going to try to provide standardized assistance to them as much as we can, keeping in mind that the state government is the primary regulatory agency and the primary support agency for the school districts, but the county too has a role to play and to be helpful. And the same applies to the schools of higher education and some of the challenges that we have that we discussed today in the second call. Overall, we're looking at trying to deal with this strange world and adapt to the strangeness of it. And I think we've tried to do that effectively now into our 5th month. Another example of it is how we're dealing with our recreational facilities. We know that we have closed Playland Amusement Park. The beach still remains open. The boardwalk remains open. The little miniature golf facility is open. The Reed Sanctuary Nature Center is open, but the main amusement park is closed, which gives us a big, large parking lot that's empty. Up at Kensico Dam Plaza, where we'll be having every week an ethnic festival, that has silenced that major activity. It's a great fun activity when it's going, but we determined it could not be done in a healthy fashion with COVID. So what we've done at both locations is establish drive-in movies so that folks can have a family entertainment, can go, family get in the car, drive over their park. There is a fee per car, and apparently these things sell out fast. So we're announcing that at the Playland parking lot, we have 2 movies scheduled on drive-in. Friday, July 31st, which is a week from this coming Friday, they'll show the movie Aladdin, which is a PG movie, and that's on the 31st. And 1 week later, on Friday, August 7th, we'll have the drive-in movie Doolittle, and that was a 2020 movie. Both are family-oriented, children-oriented movies so that you can get out of the house with the kids on a Friday night and enjoy Playland. We'll be announcing the link to be able to get tickets, and it goes fast. When we had our Kensico movie last Friday night, it took 15 minutes to sell out because we have a limited amount of parking spaces in those areas. But this is this year's version of what we usually have, Screening Under the Stars program, where we have movies and we have open seating, and people can come and sit on the great lawn at Kensico Dam and be able to watch those movies in the plaza. But since that's not possible, using the cars for the drive-in is the next best situation. There is only online pre-sales, and the tickets for Aladdin will go on sale this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Once again, we'll put out to the press directly, and it'll be in the various publications. We'll have it on our website, exactly what that link is that you can click on. Look for it and act fast because there won't be a lot of time for us to operate. We've been supported in this effort by a number of different organizations: Shar Creative, the Westchester Parks Foundation, Westchester Talk Radio 100.7, WHUD 107.1, The Peak, Hamlet Hub, Robeson Oil, Inspiria Outdoor Advertising, ENT and Allergy Associates, and Westchester Magazine. And hopefully I did my proper product placement for all of those very generous sponsors that help make this happen. Again, we have an additional movie scheduled in Kensico on Friday, August 14th. The movie there is Wonder Park, and those tickets will go on sale on the 20th. So the next two, this weekend, nothing. A week from this Friday and the following Friday, consecutive Friday nights at Playland. And then the following week after that, the 14th, we have a drive-in at Kensico. All of those things are designed to make lemonade out of the lemon of having Playland Amusement Park closed. Big parking lot available. We use it productively. We already hosted the Rhinebeck High School graduation at that parking lot, and we use it as well as a staging area for the Rye High School caravan that won. So we're trying to figure out how best to use it in this age of COVID. We want to highlight that we've reopened a section of the North County Trailway at Birdsall Road in Yorktown. That portion of the trailway sustained damage back in 2012 under Superstorm Sandy. We tackled a capital project, which we had planned to do well before that. The COVID had struck, but we did the effort to reinforce the embankment that supports the trail. And it was a rather extensive project, but we're very happy that we were able to have some success there and open that up for the people that walk and the people that bike on the North County Trailway. As we've talked about, we have opened 4 of our pools, public pools, and 2 of our beaches. We have 3 beaches normally, 5 pools normally. I mentioned in terms of the beaches that the Glen Island facility is not available to us this year, but Croton Point Park is, and Playland Beach is available. And looking at our Sunday totals of this week, we had 568 visitors to Croton Point Park and 1,438 visitors to Playland. Those numbers are slightly down. We had numbers that were a little higher in the last couple of weeks, 676, and then prior to that, 409 at Croton, 2,086 last week at Playland, and 1,469 the prior Sunday. On the other hand, the pools seem to be doing a little bit better. We had at Saxon Woods in both the morning and the afternoon sessions yesterday, 1,586 visitors. That's higher than we had the prior 2 weeks. At the Sprain pool, we had 1,699, and that's higher than the 2 prior weeks. We had at Tibbetts Brook 1,033, and that's higher than the 2 prior weeks. And Wilson Woods Park in Mount Vernon, 535, slightly below last week, but well ahead of the first week that it was open. And obviously, with the hot summer weather, we wanted to make sure we had the protocol to open these things because we knew that these 6 facilities provide public cooling and water access to beaches for pools. And it's very important for us to look at Have we done the right protocol? How do we prove that? By whether or not the spread expands. And when we look at the different positives that we get, we are not looking at any kind of an increase that's significant, nor that we can track back geographically to the presence of a pool. Usually these pools draw from closer in their geographic area. So if we see a particular spike within a certain cohort of Mount Vernon, we would look specifically at the pool. Contact tracing does that work for us, but we're not seeing any of that, and we think that's a good sign. I think it means that we've made the right decisions with Bicycle Sunday, we made the right decisions with golf courses, we made the right decisions with our beaches, and the right decisions with our pools. And it also tells us that because we're careful about how we make these decisions by not opening Playland Amusement Park or opening the Kensico Dam for the ethnic festivals, that we're basically doing the right thing as best as we can. I want to highlight also with this weather that we're facing, the very high temperatures, our DSS, Department of Social Services, has established some cooling stations and drop-in centers located around Westchester County. I'm not going to list each of them here, but they're located in Peekskill, White Plains, 2 in White Plains, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and a couple in Yonkers as well. And we encourage you, if you are a DSS recipient, and if you'd like to, please contact our social service offices. I think the Mount Vernon office serves as one of the hubs. There's one in Peekskill, White Plains, and Yonkers as well. We'll make the numbers available to you in our press releases and online. So if you're watching this and you need to know, you don't know those numbers already, we'll work and try to get that together. Most of our municipal governments are establishing cooling stations as well. They are generally in the senior citizen centers located in their communities. We have some staff people working on collating a list for everybody. We'll try to put that out to the media as well. Generally, a cooling station gets used by a person who is not able, does not have air conditioning, sufficient air conditioning, or other means to cool where they live, or if there's a power outage where they live. And rather than sit in a sweltering circumstance, either at home, in a single-family house, or in a multi-family house, they would go to one of the cooling stations. Usually the cooling stations are not open overnight. DSS would be an exceptional situation. But the municipal local cooling stations are usually daytime, maybe into the early evening settings. We'll try to collate and provide that list to the press so you can put it out there in your publications. And then if you live in one of those communities, you can call your local town, village, or city hall to find out how we can go about doing those things. Just one other issue, not directly related to COVID, but certainly an issue of the day. There's been quite a bit of discussion about New York City having passed legislation that changes the means of assessing police action and whether or not it is subject to legal action because of the way they've conducted themselves. This obviously would apply to any police action within the boundaries of the city of New York, and a number of different police departments and PBAs have come out and made some statements. Our position in Westchester County begins with our county attorney analyzing the law for impacts. They've taken the weekend to do that. They're going to brief our senior executive group by tomorrow, and then we'll brief the county police senior management team on Wednesday, we think, to talk about what the implications of those law means. In the meantime, no matter what the comments may be from different other sources, Westchester County manages the county police. We do not manage the other police agencies within the county. We still leave it to our senior management in law enforcement to make the decisions about whether or not any enforcement activity should occur outside of Westchester County as a jurisdiction. If there's an incident and there are police officers that are dealing with that incident, they check with superior management and they make the determination, do they go into Rockland County, do they go into Connecticut, do they go into Putnam or any other county, do they go into the city of New York? And we're going to leave those decisions on a case-by-case basis to the senior management team. It is not a policy to do one thing or the other. It is a judgment call case by case, and they'll make that decision. Obviously, if we are dealing with a crime and trying to enforce it, and the individuals involved with that crime or potential crime are crossing into New York City, we will forward that information to New York City authorities and let them know coming their way is a car or some other group of people. It's not that we just let them go once they reach the border. But it is a question of the best use of our manpower resources as well. Westchester County does not provide street policing in any community except for Mount Kisco. We do provide a little bit of services in Cortland as well. But in Mount Kisco, we are the local police for Mount Kisco, and every place else, particularly in the area that borders New York City, we are policing the parkways of Westchester County. So whether it's the Hutch, the Sawmill, the Bronx River combination, cross-county parkways, our county police might be involved in a vehicle-related situation, and so that's the level at which this is going to happen. But New York City has used its legislative authority to do what it chooses to do. They are within their authority to do that. Our senior management team in the county police will determine whether or not an action is warranted, and will either authorize it or refrain from doing it, and we'll leave those decisions to the police department. Separate and distinct from that, as you well know, we've announced it now over the last month, we have empaneled a group of individuals that include both citizen activists, member of the clergy, people of other background, as well as those from the police services, to sit as a police reform and reinvention task force. And those individuals are scheduled to look at a host of different issues. They've started to meet already under the leadership, co-chairmanship of Mayo Bartlett and Leroy Frazier. And they are going to look at all elements of police functioning. They're going to look at issues of training. They're going to look at issues of recruitment. They're going to look at issues that relate to some of the things we're talking about here, those policies and procedures, and how those are connected to the way officers are trained, either as new recruits or in-service training. That process is a 6-month process. We do not expect to make policies outside of that process until they've had a chance to discuss things. There are public forums by which the public can comment before this committee. And 3 of the members of the committee are members of the Westchester County Board of Legislators, Colin Smith, Lyndon Williams, and Terry Clemens. So as members of the Board of Legislators, they're in a position to identify what legislation might come out of this, as well as those of us in the administration. So we're not going to jump ahead of ourselves and make policy here on television or through press releases. We'll do it as part of a rational dialogue. And if there's anything that I can say in general about this, I think we're at a point of great emotion. There's great unrest, and there is both a point of view and a counter point of view that now are in the public arena. This is a time for reason. This is a time for cool, dispassionate analysis. That's not a popular thing to say. There are many protests that are going on. As long as they stay peaceful, as long as they don't lend themselves into bad behavior, people have a right to assemble. They have a right to express their opinions, and those who hold alternate positions can also do the same. And I think it's perfectly fine. It's the expression in a small d democracy to be able to do that. It's also important to understand that the decisions to change and reform things come from duly elected government officials who are listening to people and trying to craft that change. And that craft of change doesn't happen out in the street. It doesn't happen in the back rooms. It happens in formal discussion rooms that are open to the public, that the public can see. That's my commitment, that we have that dialogue, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a solid dialogue by the end of this process. That is not directly a COVID-related issue, but it's an issue of the day. And since we're not doing these every day, I wanted to make sure we covered on some of these things. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the press. We're joined by News 12 in the room, so you get extra privileges since you decided to come out. But Nikita, we've seen you in a lot of different other contexts, so we hope a little air conditioning doesn't prove to be too bad short-term. So you get the lead question and follow-up.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about schools. You mentioned that you're going to be working with a working group of local officials, I guess?
Yes, county officials and health department and related departments.
So is this what the county is doing to help school districts in the region to drum up reopening plans? Is this what they're doing?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, the governor has announced that has indicated he will announce, I believe he said August 7th, I hope I'm correct on the date, whether or not schools are going to open, and if so, under what circumstances. In the meantime, the governor, as he's done for every other industry, and as he has done for local governments, a certain protocol that has to be met in order to qualify for reopening. And in the school situations, it's obviously a very complicated situation. You're dealing with the public service that probably touches more homes than any other single one, because the kids who go to school come back home to their parents all across the community, and then they go back to school, and whatever the transactions are between them, this could be an area for great spread of the disease if we're not exceedingly careful. So what the school districts are doing right now are going through the checklist, if you want to call it that. Protocols is the fancy word for it, but a checklist of all the things that they have to do, and it differs based on the students you're talking about. I've made the analogy, we can easily appreciate it. Younger kids pose one set of problems. Older students have a different set of realities. Older students will understand what you're talking about, but they may be less willing to do it. Younger kids might be kind of willing to do it, and then they'll change focus because they're young and they're not yet mature enough to be able to grasp the severity of the situation. So as the school districts are going through those checkoffs, there are areas of overlap where the county government can be helpful. I mentioned that the prime area of connection is between the state, which establishes education policy for both K to 12 and higher ed as well. But there are certain areas of overlap. The county overlaps with them because it's the county health department that will provide advice on immediate issues when they arise. In some school districts, transportation to and from school are provided by kids using the county Beeline bus system. So the county is involved in that. We have certain early intervention responsibilities with schools and some other kinds of transportation needs for children who are otherwise developmentally affected. And there's a role to play there. Then depending on the particular district and the particular set of circumstances, as they put together their checklist, their protocol list, we've made this working task force available to them to help work it out so they put their plan together and they know insofar as that plan affects the county that the county will do these things along those lines. That's what we're seeking to do with it. It's a complicated process, and I don't envy the task of the school superintendents because they obviously have to work with an elected board. They have to work with the parents of the district. They have to work with the administrators and the teachers. There's a lot of constituencies there. We're trying to be a partner. Where there's a county overlap, work with them, help them, solve the problem. Don't be bureaucratic about it. Don't say, well, we'll do this if you do that. Work together, see if we can help them accomplish the mission.
Thank you.
Very good. Any questions that we have remotely?
Yep, we got one from David Proper from the Journal News. It's about cooling centers. It's asking if the county is going to be doing anything to operate them a little bit differently due to coronavirus, following any other guidelines, anything like that, for example.
Well, once again, to do a traditional cooling center, which are generally, as I've said, provinces of the local governments, there will be capacity limits based on the Phase 4 requirements, masking limitations, social distancing, and all those different things. As we do our survey of municipal cooling centers, we expect that those protocols, those standards will be in effect as well. Oftentimes the reality is that the people who would most use this service are those who are senior citizens. And many times they don't have a children's home to go to. Some they don't have local family and so forth. And those are the folks that are least willing to come out into the public. If we reopened all of our senior centers tomorrow, we would not get the 100% attendance that we had back in February when we last had those centers open for a month. So I think we're working in a situation where the local governments want to provide an effort for a location for a person who needs to stay cool during the day so they don't stay in their house, an apartment without proper ventilation and become sick, particularly if they're older and compromised. But those individuals that are older and compromised may not want to go out of the house. So it becomes a localized challenge to figure out where the market is and so forth. From the county standpoint, we've never found that a county cooling facility attracted from the broader population. What we do have that's targeted are those people who are in social services in a DSS capacity, and particularly those who are homeless. And many folks in the wintertime who do not have a shelter will use our locations as a drop-in shelter on a night where the temperature gets very low, called code blue. And so in those situations, people are taken into the shelter for an individual overnight place to stay warm in the winter. In the summertime, it's a little bit different. You don't quite have the same degree of physical jeopardy for extreme cold as you would for extreme heat. But those are the centers that are made available, as I said, through our various locations in those cities that I mentioned, which we'll put out as a list so David and any of our other colleagues can see it. Any other questions from our folks? Very good. Well, we're trying very hard to convey solid information and to do it as frequently as necessary, but as infrequently as possible, so as not to give the impression that every day is breaking news. Every day is, another day, and we're all trying to get through this long, seemingly interminable period of time. Now that we started this at the very end of this winter, we've lost the spring season. Now we're in the process of losing the summer season, but the numbers are good. We're trying very hard to make sure that they're perfect. I hope to be able to tell you next week we had no fatalities this past week. I'd like to tell you that the active cases and the hospitalizations dipped even lower, and I hope that'll be the case. But it'll really be up to you and me as individuals. A government can do so much. Policing can do so much. And in a time now we're debating what is the proper role of policing. In some hands, people say, well, don't do this, but at the same token, enforce the masks laws. You have to look at the balance that exists in the society. It really comes down to us as individuals. We pride ourselves in our American individualism. Most of us resist the thought that we need to be told what to do. Fine. No one's going to tell you to do it. But common sense says when you protect yourself against the other person and the other person protects himself against you, then you don't get the disease. If you don't get the disease, you can function in the society, you can consume goods and services, the society can start to pick itself up out of this economic mess that we find ourselves in, and we can get back to a greater stage of normal. That's the hope. And hopefully a week from today when I report again, we'll have some good news for you. And certainly we'll have other press briefings on different singular topics, and we'll save COVID for these updates once a week. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for watching. Have a good week ahead. Stay safe.